It's still recruiting season for Kentucky basketball, and the Cats just took a visit with one of the best scoring point guards in the 2026 class.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be discussing Brandon McCoy Jr., a five-star point guard that the Wildcats just recently visited. What do we know about McCoy, and what do we know about the Wildcats and who they have visited recently alongside McCoy Jr.? Going to break that down for you here today, as well as some college football pick'em. We're going to go through some big-time games this weekend. We're going to discuss Kentucky versus Georgia. The Wildcats may very well be in trouble against the Bulldogs this weekend. Going to break all of that down here for you on today's show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. So Kentucky basketball out on the recruiting trail. Their staffers all over the place visiting a number of players. But according to Jacob Polacek, friend of the show over at Kentucky Sports Radio, Kentucky checked in with number 1 ranked Brandon McCoy Jr. and 4-star forward Christian Collins this week. It was, if I'm not mistaken, Jason Hart alongside Mark Pope in attendance to watch both Collins and McCoy Jr. play on Wednesday. We've talked a little bit about Brandon McCoy Jr. on the show here before, but we've not really dived in, kind of taken a dive into what he is as a player just yet. In case you don't know, Brandon McCoy, a 6'5", 170-pound player in the 2026 recruiting class. He right now doesn't really have a ton in terms of On3's recruiting prediction machine. There's nobody here, if I'm not mistaken, kind of in the lead for McCoy's services. He is ranked as the number 1 overall player, the number 1 point guard, number one player in the state of California, according to On3's industry ranking. 24/7 Sports has him rated as the number 2 player in the class, as does ESPN. But Rivals and On3 both think that Brandon is the best player in 2026. And look, it's looking like Kentucky is going after some high-profile guards as of late. You have Jasper Johnson, you have Mikael Brown Jr., you have all these different players, Caden Lewis. You have all these different guys that Kentucky is really trying to invest in. If they were somehow miraculously able to get this kid, a 6'5", 175-pound point guard, mind you, out of Bellflower, California, he plays at St. John Bosco High School, it would just be incredible for Kentucky in their recruiting and their future class. McCoy as a player, he's listed as a point guard, but he is a high-profile scorer. Obviously, at 6'5", he's got a little bit of bounce to him as well. He's a solid defender. He's crafty. He picks up steals. He works well in transition. It's all the buzzwords, all the things you need to know about any high 5-star prospect. He is just a well-rounded, gifted athlete. He can do a little bit of everything. He can shoot, he can pass, he can defend, he can dunk, he can rebound. At 6'5", that's something you're going to want to see. And hey, in Mark Pope's system, we've seen a lot of taller, lengthier wing type players almost run point and run at shooting guard and been extremely effective at 6'5" or even taller for Pope. So this is a player that obviously everybody and their mother would possibly want. He is incredible at everything. He can shoot. Again, he can shoot from outside the arc. He can hit runners in the lane. He can hit at the rim. Like I mentioned, he's really, really fun to watch in transition whenever he's dunking. It is just extremely aggressive, high-octane basketball at the highest level you could possibly imagine. Could he add a little bit of weight to his frame? Probably, to become more of an elite player. You've seen Kentucky bring in guys in the past that throughout their NBA career have kind of muscled up and been able to kind of round their games out. Because of that, I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a perfect example of this, but McCoy is just a pure talent. I mean, there's not really anything negative that I can say about his game. He is just a complete player. Again, according to Jacob Polacek, Kentucky taking a look at McCoy while he was playing, he received an offer back in July, if I'm not mistaken, and he was super, super excited about it. He actually told Kentucky Sports Radio, he said, I know there's a new coach, so I want to see how it goes this year. In the past, it's been like a family. They have a lot of support. It's a good education for sure. My parents are big on that. I also want to do stuff outside of basketball because basketball isn't the only thing in life. College is supposed to be fun. So I want to have a good experience. It's looking like at some point here in the future, he may schedule a visit with Kentucky in the coming months. I'm not sure if that's actually going to happen, but I've said it on like the past 3 straight shows. I want to reiterate it here again today. Mark Pope is proving that he is capable of doing things that Kentucky has done in the past on the recruiting trail. Now, this doesn't shock me. This doesn't shock anyone. I don't think that Kentucky is, despite a new coach, still going to be able to get a lot of really high-profile guys because of their name, because of their history, because of who they are as a program. As Pope has continued to say, it's much more bigger than an individual. It's about the team and the program, and I think a lot of recruits are going to continue to show interest in Kentucky because of that. People like McCoy, players like McCoy, would have an opportunity to go and shine anywhere, I think, frankly. There would be so much attention placed on him as the number 1 player in the 2026 class. But when you want to focus on, like he said, college, outside of basketball, if you want to focus on a community, if you want to focus on family, if you want to focus on education, I think that kind of limits your options here. I think you're looking at, he's from Cali. I think you're looking at USC. I think you're looking at UCLA. I think Kentucky, as far as family atmosphere and things outside of basketball, I think there's tons that Kentucky could provide in Lexington. It's an incredible town with a lot of people that really care about basketball and then therefore will care about you as family, as a part of what's kind of going on with the culture. There are few places that I think would be better all around than the University of Kentucky for Brandon McCoy to come to. Of course, we've got a lot, and I mean a lot of time between now and Brandon actually making a decision as to whether or not he will come to play for the Cats or not. So we'll keep it, and we'll keep monitoring it. A big-time player, a big-time scorer, just a gifted player. He's similar to guys like Chris Senack, McCoy Brown Jr., as far as guys we've mentioned recently on the show where you just watch them and you just immediately understand, like, hey, that's a 5-star guy that's going to get buckets in college. So let me know what you think about Brandon McCoy Jr. in the comments below. Received an offer from Kentucky recently and being visited by part of Kentucky's staff. Okay, I want to discuss here for a little bit college football pick'em. I want to do this with you guys. I want you guys to go through with me and pick some of these big-time college football games this weekend. And, of course, we're going to talk about Kentucky versus Georgia. I've got some concerns about the Cats. Before we dive into that, though, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at Factor Meals. You can fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. You can meet your wellness goals thanks to the new menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and are ready to eat in just 2 minutes, so no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. They've got 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every single week, so you'll always have new flavors to explore, and you can crush your wellness goals as well this fall with dietitian-approved meals and ingredients that you can trust. You can head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 and use code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That is code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50, again, to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook, and we have something a little different for you because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And if that's not enough, be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app and use it for FanDuel's Double Your Winnings for all of Sunday, September 15th, pregame moneyline bets. Profit Boost will be live starting today, Thursday, September 12th, so you can view your account page now to learn more about your boost. You can just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. That is FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, continuing along here on the Thursday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. I really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football season is in full swing. I love talking about college football. We're going to talk about Kentucky, Georgia here to wrap up the show. But before we get to that, I've got 8 different college football games I want to walk through here with you, just so that you can know kind of some of the big time games you want to watch this weekend, kind of give you your thoughts in the comments below about who you think's going to win, who you think's going to lose. I've got 4 different here's how we're going to do this. And this is how I do it on my Substack as well. We're going to have 4 different top 25 games, right? We're going to have 4 different, most of them going to include ranked on ranked, but some of the time it's just one top 25 team versus an unranked team, right? 4 games. Then we're going to have 4 more games. One of them being an off-the-radar game, so an unranked matchup that maybe not a ton of people are talking about. We've got a sneaky good game, a game that's also off the radar, but like almost nobody is really going to be paying attention to it, but it has the potential to become a barn burner, at least in my eyes. We've got the sneaky bad game. We've got a game where a team is favored by at least 17 points that could end up being a lot closer or potentially being an upset. Or it could end up being a blowout. That's why it's the sneaky bad game. And then the upset of the week. I've got an upset every single week. Last year when I did this, I did not miss a single pick. So hopefully we're able to keep that going here. I want to start here with a top 25 matchup that I think a lot of you, if you're into college football, will absolutely love, and that is Arizona at Kansas State. Number 20, Arizona versus Kansas State. Now, Arizona taking a step back now that Jed Fish is at Washington. A lot of different pieces across the board for them, but they still have enough on offense to really make things go. McMillan is insane at receiver, a 6'5" receiver that already has 315 yards receiving. Noah Fafita is just an incredible quarterback, one of the best in college football. You've got a really solid running game to boot as well, but they're going up against Kansas State, a really physical team that has found their identity with their quarterback, Avery Johnson, who kind of split time with Will Howard, who's now at Ohio State a season ago. And here they are now. A more finesse-style team, I would say, in Arizona, going on the road in a really fun new Big 12 matchup against a more physical Kansas State team. The line is currently set at 7 for Kansas State. Both these teams 2-0. I am going to take Kansas State in this game. If this was at Arizona, maybe we're having a little bit of a different conversation, but Arizona has not looked phenomenal so far through these first 2 games. Look at their last 2 scores. Against New Mexico, they gave up 39 points. Now, they won 61-39, but I actually watched a large portion of this game, and it was kind of rough. Then they played NAU, who's not even a Division I FBS team, and they won 22-10. So the offense, really good in one game, really bad in the other. Defense, really good in one game, awful in the other. And I want to note here, New Mexico had a running quarterback that was able to carve them up both through the air and on the ground. Avery Johnson, a little bit of a runner as well. So I think this is going to end up being a tough one for Arizona. Give me the Wildcats of Kansas State. I think they are going to end up taking the win there. Okay, another top 25 game that we've got to talk about it. I mean, it's happening. There could be a little bit of concern here, but I'm not really worried about this one. Number 4, Alabama on the road taking on the Wisconsin Badgers. Alabama favored by 16 points in this one. They beat South Florida 42-16 this past weekend. But if you saw that game, you know Alabama, it was a 13-14 game for far too long into the fourth quarter before things kind of started to finally open up for Bama. Do they have issues? Yes. The offensive line is abysmal relative to Crimson Tide lines of years past. It's bad, just full stop. Is the offense still finding its identity through the running game? I think so. I think Alabama should probably be a little bit more physical and aggressive running the ball. I think they should try that. The pass protection's bad, but the offensive line, hey, when they're healthy, they can go out there and they can run block against essentially anybody. The defense has issues in the secondary at times, but that's not a major concern here, I don't think, against Wisconsin, who's still trying to find a new offensive identity, Air Raid Badgers, as they call them, after being one of the most physical programs in college football over the last several seasons. If this was Wisconsin like half a decade ago, I would have felt way more comfortable looking at this as a possible upset than I do right now. You talk about Bama looking for an identity. You talk about Wisconsin looking for an identity. Arizona, Kansas State, the two teams we just mentioned, more sure in kind of how they operate on both sides of the ball. This is a game that I think has the potential to end up being closer than the 16-point margin that Vegas has, but it may not be close in terms of the product that we see on the field, in terms of just Alabama possibly dominating the trenches, controlling the clock, making sure that they are able to get out of Camp Randall with a victory. Also, Wisconsin winning their first two games against Western Michigan and South Dakota, 28-14 and 27-13. Not necessarily awe-inspiring football. So give me Alabama, but this is one you at least have to take a peek at. And if it ends up being a blowout, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily shock me at all as well. South Carolina on the road, LSU on the road against South Carolina. This is an extremely confusing game to pick for College Game Day. And yes, it is the pick for College Game Day. South Carolina, a 7-point underdog at home. ESPN's FPI, their matchup predictor, has LSU as a 51% favorite. So this is essentially a coin flip in ESPN's computer model's eyes. Now, we've talked about ESPN's computer model in the past. How accurate is it? How good is it? It's kind of iffy at times, but LSU, through their first two games, they've had a couple of issues on defense, but overall it's looked much, much better than it was a season ago. They lost to USC 27-20 in the opener in a really, really good game. They asked, I think, their two safeties to do way too much in those contests. They asked too much of their secondary. The pass rush, while getting pressures, was not getting home, and Miller Moss was still able to kind of dissect and make really good decisions. Nichols, I mean, they gave up 21 points in that. It was kind of iffy for maybe a half of a quarter too long against Nichols, but they were able to kind of put some points up, throw the ball around in that one. And then you look at South Carolina, 23-19 in their season opener against Old Dominion. I thought this game was going to be a blowout whenever Kentucky played them. And sure enough, it was a blowout, just not in favor of the Cats. 31-6 was the final score. I don't want to talk about that game anymore. We talked about it recently. I don't want to discuss it anymore. Point being, South Carolina, they've got a really, really good defensive line, and overall, I think one of the better defenses in the SEC. They're figuring things out right now with Lenora Sellers, who is just, frankly, doesn't look like that great of a quarterback or that explosive of a quarterback. Raheem Sanders from Arkansas transferred in for South Carolina. He's been solid so far this season, but it's going to be how explosive can LSU be in this game, and if they can't, can they establish some semblance of a ground game or at least try and push South Carolina around a little bit? I'm not sure. I'm concerned about Garrett Nussmeier going to the air against guys like Dylan Stewart and this South Carolina pass rush. It could be a major matchup problem. I think that actually I'm going to pick South Carolina to win this game. This is not the upset of the week, as it's essentially a coin flip here, according to ESPN. But I think it's definitely going to be, a shocker for a lot of people, especially in LSU circles. You begin to ask some questions about where Brian Kelly is at. Okay, another top 25 matchup where a team is favored by 16 points. Missouri, number 6 Missouri. That's right, the Tigers are still top 10 in the country. Eli Drinkwitz has Missouri in a really, really good spot right now against number 24, Boston College. If you had told me that Boston College was going to come into this season and they were going to be ranked after 2 games, I wouldn't have believed you. Of course, Missouri projected to win this game by quite a bit. You look at the first 2 games for Boston College, obviously the 28-13 victory over Florida State on the road, might I add. Just dominating fashion. Of course, Florida State couldn't move at all on offense against anybody. I don't think they may struggle against air with DJU at the quarterback position. 56-0 win against Duquesne. Thomas Castellanos, 19 completions, 6 touchdowns, 6 passing touchdowns so far this season. He was a really good dual threat last year. Turnover prone at times a season ago, but he's been more efficient this year. Obviously against 2 bad teams, if you want to throw Florida State in there. Missouri so far, they've shut out their first two opponents, 51-0 and 38-0. Of course, that was against Murray State and Vanderbilt, Murray State and Buffalo. I have no idea why I just said Vanderbilt there. They have been able to essentially do whatever they want. They've created turnovers. They've not really been explosive in the passing game in terms of reaching the end zone. Brady Cook only has one touchdown pass, but they've still looked okay. They've done what they've needed to do, and I frankly think they're going to be able to get it done against Boston College this Saturday. It's possible that they win this game by more than 16 points. We're talking about it because it's a top 25 matchup, and frankly, I like Thomas Castellanos as a quarterback. I think a lot of people in America do, but they're probably going to get their face torn off in this one against Missouri if I had to expect. Okay, a game that may not be on everyone's radar. It's an interesting one, and it's kind of an anxiety bowl for at least one team. Before we break it down, before we dive into these final four games, including the Kentucky-Georgia game, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It's not just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit the other leading job sites, so if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. You can hire professionals like a professional over on LinkedIn. You can post your job for free over at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, wrapping up the Thursday edition of Locked On Kentucky, we're going to go through these final four games here. Let's get to the off-the-radar contest, a game that maybe not everybody's going to be looking at, but I think it's important, at least for this college football season. Florida at home against the Texas A&M Aggies. Mike Elko, new head coach of A&M. Florida struggling with Billy Napier, a rough situation there down in Gainesville. I don't think that Florida, there's a chance they may not win a single SEC game this year. I mean, legitimately. There's a chance they do not win an SEC contest this season. This could churn things around, could give you some positive feelings kind of heading into the back end of your slate. Frankly, Florida may not win another game if they don't really start to pick things up here quickly. At least the outlook's not going to predict that, or looking beyond if they lose this game. It's going to be hard to predict them to win another game because they don't play another Group of 5 team. Their out-of-conference games are UCF and Florida State. They've already played Miami and Samford. Yikes. DJ Lagway looked good against Samford, but it's Samford. He was 21 of 31 so far through this season. He's 21 of 31, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, 487 yards passing. He's not been bad. Frankly, he's not been as bad as Connor Wigman, who faced a really tough Notre Dame defense in week 1, 23 of 44, 225 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. A&M's favored in this game by 60% and a 3.5-point favorite according to Vegas. This is a game where I think you start to monitor how Texas A&M looks on defense with Mike Elko in there. They've got a really talented defensive front. I think they're solid on both sides of the line of scrimmage. Florida falling apart right now, reeling, looking for anything here to kind of build some momentum so that they don't head into what's going to become a more difficult schedule, kind of reeling, especially after that Miami loss. I'm taking A&M. I'm not a Florida fan, but for the fans and their emotional state, I hope they at least look competent in this one. TCU versus UCF. This is my sneaky good game of the weekend. At 6:30 on Fox, this is a Big 12 matchup. KJ Jefferson, RJ Harvey, Kobe Hudson, a really solid trio of quarterback, running back, and receiver for UCF. Then you've got TCU, who has looked booty cheeks ever since Sonny Dykes and the Frogs went to the national championship game 2 seasons ago. They beat Stanford on the road. I'll give them that. They were able to eke one out against Stanford on the road. And then they beat LIU 45-0. I mean, there's nothing really to go off of here just yet for TCU. UCF's favored by 1 point on the road in this game. Jefferson, as we all know, former SEC quarterback, really solid. I think he's going to do good things during his final year of college. The UCF's won 2 blowout games, and he's looked decent. RJ Harvey is just a beast for them in the backfield, has been for several years now. Kobe Hudson, former Auburn Tiger, has also looked the part at receiver. Really good all-around guy, can go up and get balls, can be a possession guy, can be somebody you put in the slot to make plays and to wiggle around. I think that this will be a game where you see a lot of points scored. The over-under in this is 62.5. Josh Hoover for TCU, 620 yards and 4 touchdowns so far this season, even though it's against weaker competition. This could be a barn burner, guys. This is a late-night game where you could see maybe 40-plus from both teams. At least I'm hoping. I think this is going to be a sneaky good game that not a ton of people are going to be paying attention to, I don't think. You've got your sneaky bad game, a game that, again, a team is favored by at least 17 points and could potentially go awry, or could be an upset, or could be a blowout. That's why it's a sneaky bad game. You've got Nevada against Minnesota. And you may say, Lance, why is this 2:30 game on Big Ten for Minnesota? Why on earth is this your sneaky bad game? Well, Minnesota hasn't necessarily been promising against non-conference competition in the past. And I don't necessarily know if they're going to be able to cover this 17.5-point spread against a Nevada team that is way more competent than we expected them to be heading into this season. They barely lost to SMU to open the year. Then they went on the road and beat Troy, who was a really good group of 5 team. And then they lost by 3 points at home against Georgia Southern, 20-17. Brendan Lewis, former Colorado quarterback, is in here at Nevada. He's already got 561 yards and 5 touchdowns passing. They are more competent, again, like I said, than we expected. I think against a team like Minnesota, who's slow, who's plodding, who doesn't really have anything explosive on offense, even against lesser competition like this, I think that you could be in for a sneaky type of game that could end up coming down to the wire, or could end up being an upset, or again, like I mentioned, could end up being a blowout. Who knows? And to wrap up the show, we've got the upset of the week. And if you know me, you know where we're going. We're going Purdue at home against Notre Dame. Notre Dame, this past weekend, lost to NIU. Much to my pleasure. This was just amazing. Hudson Card, former Texas quarterback, still at Purdue. He's been okay through 2 weeks. Through one game against Indiana State. I mean, there's nothing really to go off of there in terms of statistics or even eye test. They won 49-0. There was nothing really to say about it. But we have things to talk about with Notre Dame, who went on the road and beat Texas A&M 23-13 in week 1, and then they turn around and again lost to NIU 16-14. I hope nothing but the worst for the Irish in this one. I hope that Purdue comes out and smokes them. Now, will they smoke them? I'm not sure, but hey, leave it up to Notre Dame to just absolutely fall apart in the weirdest fashions. Give me Purdue at home for the upset. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hey, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.